I was 14, my parents sent me to spend the summer with my grandparents. They lived in a house deep in the woods. No neighbors, no streetlights, just trees and wild sounds all around. It was beautiful during the day, but at night, it seemed like the darkness just swallowed everything around us. In the evening, my grandparents went to visit neighbors a few kilometers away. They had some kind of meeting. I was told not to leave the house and to wait. I turned on the TV to drown out the sounds of the forest. Outside, it started to drizzle, and gusts of wind shook the windows. I tried not to think about being alone, but the feeling of anxiety grew stronger and stronger. Suddenly, I heard a soft tapping sound. At first, I thought it was a branch hitting the window. But then the tapping repeated, rhythmic, as if someone were deliberately tapping their finger on the glass. I walked over to the living room window, carefully lifted the curtain, and froze. A man was standing right outside the window. His face was almost completely hidden by his hood and the darkness, but I could clearly see the gleam in his eyes. He was just looking at me and smiling. I screamed and jumped back. The TV continued to hum in the background, but the house became unbearably quiet. The man slowly raised his hand and knocked again, this time louder. I rushed to the phone to call my grandmother or the police, but as soon as I picked up the receiver, there was silence. The line was dead. I looked out the window again. He was gone. But after a few seconds, I heard the floorboards creak on the porch. He was climbing the steps. I ran upstairs, hid in my grandfather's room, and closed the door. I could hear footsteps downstairs, then the sound of a door opening. He had entered the house. The floorboards creaked closer and closer under his feet. And then he stopped right outside my door. Several long seconds of silence. Then the handle jerked. Once, then harder, then furiously, as if he was trying to break down the door. I covered my mouth with my hand, trying not to make a sound. My heart seemed to be beating so loudly that it could be heard in the hallway. Suddenly, everything went quiet.
I sat there for about 20 minutes until I heard voices. It was my grandparents returning home. When they opened my door, I tearfully told them everything that had happened. My grandfather immediately checked the doors and windows. The living room window was wide open. There were dirty shoe prints on the windowsill, and footprints leading into the forest were visible in the grass near the house. The police arrived in the morning, but they didn't find anyone. The man had disappeared, as if he had vanished into the darkness. Since then, when I visited my grandparents, I never stayed in the house alone again.
Night. A thin haze rises above the deserted streets of the city. Street lamps barely illuminate the sidewalks. Everything seems calm, but someone is watching. His eyes sparkle in the darkness, following every movement. He knows this city. Every street, every alleyway is his stage. People call him the Shadow. No one knows who he really is, and today he has a new target. He walks quietly, almost silently, gliding across the wet asphalt. Today he has chosen Alex, a young man returning home from work. Alex never suspected that his usual route would turn into a trap. The maniac hides around the corner, watching. Alex walks along the park, looking at his phone. The maniac analyzes every movement, the speed of his steps, his habit of keeping his hands in his pockets, the way he looks at people passing by. The maniac's inner thoughts. He thinks he's safe. He has no idea I'm here. It's all too easy for him. Perfect for me. The maniac is in no hurry. He loves the moment when fear is not yet realized, when the victim is still safe and his power over the situation is growing.
Alex notices movement out of the corner of his eye. He turns around. No one is there. His heart beats faster. The shadow knows. Now the game has begun. He speeds up, but quietly, almost imperceptibly. Alex hears quiet footsteps behind him, but thinks it's just a passerby. The maniac's inner thoughts. He's trying to escape. How ridiculous. I'm always one step ahead. He'll never catch up with me.
The park grows darker. The lights flicker. Alex runs faster, but his breathing is ragged. The shadow is in no hurry. It follows Alex, keeping itself hidden. Alex speeds up and looks back. At this moment, the camera seems to show the shadow's point of view. Every step, every movement is like a chess game. The maniac's inner thoughts. He's trembling. He's afraid. But fear is not only his weakness, it is my pleasure. Alex enters a narrow alley. His path is blocked by a shadow. He tries to turn around, but it's too late.
Did you think you could escape? The maniac whispers quietly. Alex tries to resist, but fear paralyzes him. He feels the shadow's cold gaze. The world shrinks to the sound of breathing, footsteps, and the rustle of rain. The maniac's inner thoughts. He's afraid, and I can feel it with every fiber of my being. My power over him is absolute, but why rush? The pleasure is in the details, in the anticipation. The shadow slowly lets Alex go, leaving him trembling but alive in the alley. Alex is left alone. He trembles with fear, but tries to leave. He realizes that his life will never be the same again. The shadow returns to his usual mask: neighbor, colleague, random passerby. No one suspects that behind the door lurks a hunter who plays with people like pieces on a chessboard. The maniac's inner thoughts. Tomorrow, I will choose a new target, and the game will begin again, but the consequences will be more serious.
A few years ago, I traveled to South Carolina to spend a couple of weeks in a secluded cabin by the lake. Many tourists rented this house, a quiet place in the woods, no neighbors nearby, only water and thick greenery all around. It was ideal for relaxation and recharging. The first few days passed quietly, fishing during the day, books in the evening, a bonfire by the water. But on the fourth night, I woke up to a strange sound. Someone was knocking on the door. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but the knocking continued, steady and clear. I looked at my watch. It was 2:47 a.m. No one comes to such a remote place for no reason. I cautiously approached the door, but did not open it. Instead, I asked, "Who's there?" There was no answer. The knocking repeated. This time it was louder. I turned off the lights to make the house seem darker and went to the window. There was a figure standing on the porch. A man in a long coat with a hood. He stood motionless, staring straight at the window where I was hiding behind the curtain. I jumped back and grabbed my phone to call the police. But there was no signal, not a single bar. Meanwhile, the knocking turned into a scraping sound. Someone was dragging something metal across the door. The sound pierced me to the bone. I rushed upstairs to the bedroom and barricaded the door with a wardrobe. I could hear heavy footsteps below, as if someone was slowly walking around the house. Then, the shutters creaked. He was checking the windows.
At one point, I clearly heard the front door handle jerk. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then the door shook from heavy blows. I clutched my phone and looked at the screen again in despair. 1 bar of signal. I immediately dialed 911 and whispered an explanation of the situation. The operator told me to stay quiet and wait. Downstairs, the blows to the door became so strong that it seemed as if the wood was about to crack. At some point, they stopped abruptly. Silence fell. It was so deafening that my ears rang. 20 minutes later, I heard a siren. The police arrived and combed the area, but there were no traces or investigators around. It was as if no one had been there. The officer said it was probably some hunter or a random traveler, but I saw him look at the deep scratches on my door. After that night, I moved out early. I never went back to that house. But sometimes, when I hear a knock on the door late at night, my hands get cold.